Welcome, everyone, to the 2007-2008 NFL season with the 32-team franchise. Here is the Cincinnati Bengals recap. Yes, they were 7-9 and were the third team in the AFC North ahead of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Bengals were an off-and-on team. They started out losing Carson Palmer in Game 1, but then he ended up returning around Week 5, and then they started to bounce back. As you can see, 3,200 yards, 30 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Did reach over 100 rushing yards for someone who tends to be more of a pocket QB. 18 sacks. Carson Palmer had a lot of weapons this season. I mean, Reggie Kelly, their tight end, just showing some highlights here with 590 receiving yards, 6 receiving touchdowns. Reggie Kelly would leave them in the offseason, and they ended up replacing him with John Carlson, the rookie tight end. With so many options, I was expecting the Bengals to do better, but when there was, I believe it was Doug Johnson taking over as quarterback for Carson Palmer, the Bengals were, I think, 1-4, 1-3 maybe. So they had some work to do to fix that. Now we start moving on to Chris Henry, 437 receiving yards, three receiving touchdowns. Played a fair role, but TJ Houshmandzadeh, with 810 receiving yards and 7 receiving touchdowns, was a phenomenal number 2 wide receiver next to Chad Johnson. And there's a lot of different highlights with him, finding in the end zone, big deep plays. Here he is going to get a touchdown against the Browns on a simple slant route. He beat Gary Baxter on that play. There we are, double coverage. Now, with Chad Johnson, I had all of these players' film reels as separate files, and his got corrupted in Week 15. So these highlights come from like the last 2 or 3 games of the season. So I just fed him the ball. And he did have 1,400 total receiving yards in the season, along with 12 receiving touchdowns. I allowed him to just go and scorch the Browns. I just fed him the ball, and he had a lot of highlights in this game and then the next game. But I wanted to make sure that he actually had some highlights for you Cincinnati fans, because he was a huge receiver this year. Here are Rudy Johnson, just 12 yards shy of 1,000 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, a lot of them down the middle. There you go. There's a big play there with Rudy going right up the middle. Kind of where he played the best. As for their rankings, they were the 15th in total offensive yards. They were top 10 in total passing, and they would have been higher had Carson Palmer not been hurt, but only 24th ranked in the total rushing yards. And then as for points per game, they were 20th, so they could have done a little bit better job getting touchdowns and points. As for their defense, they were the 14th ranked defense in least yards allowed. They were 26th in total least passing yards allowed, so near the bottom of the league there. And then they were top 7 in least rushing yards allowed. And they were 21st in least points allowed. They did hold the 11th pick in the 2008 NFL Draft, and they look to rebound after this season with more firepower and maybe some better defensive play.